Let's see who Ottawa takes.
To the Calgary hitman of the WHL,
Carter Yakemchuk. Wow. Solid player. Absolutely a first-round pick. Projected to be within the top 15-20. But when you have Silyev, you have Zeev Buim, you have Sam Dickinson, you have Zane Perrick available, definitely a little surprising. Certainly fits a positional need for the Ottawa Senators, right-handed defenseman, and a very talented one at that. Once again, first-round guy, top 15 selection on most mock drafts. Just considering what was available, a little shocking, but once again, they got their guy at 7th overall. So welcome to Ottawa, Carter Yakemchuk. Let's break it all down right now. Welcome, SENS Talk.
Russell winds in, feeds it back across the strike, and scores! Yakemchuk makes it 2-0.
Cross, Kachuk score! The captain, Brady Kachuk, buries it with 1:18 to go.
See you later. Go Sens, go!
So there you have it. Welcome to Ottawa, Carter Yakemchuk. What a pick. Some Sens fans I know right now are not thrilled. We're going to break it all down, and I'm going to give you many reasons as to why you should start getting excited about Carter Yakemchuk. I want to say this right now. A couple things. As I said, immediately in my instant reacting live to the draft selection at 7th overall. By the way, the first ever draft pick in Steve Steo's history as the Sens GM, so congratulations to him to kick off his tenure as the Sens GM. It's a solid pick, and I've seen a lot of people already jumping on Steve Steos and the Sens organization saying it's the same old Sens. It's Tyler Boucher all over again. No, it's not. Couldn't be any further from the Tyler Boucher situation. Not trying to throw shade on Tyler Boucher by any means. He still has a very good chance to be a fine NHL player, but we all can admit he was taken earlier than many would expect. Yakemchuk, not so much. Yakemchuk easily was a top 15 pick and essentially all the mock drafts leading up into tonight. This is a guy that in most drafts would probably go top 10. The only reason he went top 15, at the very least top 20 on some draft boards, once again, top 15, top 20 is being very generous, is because of the depth at the position in this draft. And, you know, as I said in my initial reaction, you had Zeev Buim there, you had Zane Perrick there, you had Sam Dickinson there, you had, Anton Silyev there. It is a little surprising that they went Carter Yakemchuk, but at the same time, you really can't go wrong because all the players I just mentioned, Yakemchuk included, are all likely going to be stars, in my opinion, in the National Hockey League for years to come. So that's enough rambling, enough addressing the elephant in the room. Let's get fired up about the newest Ottawa Senator prospect. My goodness, this guy is going to be a flashy player, a player with a lot of flair, a lot of energy. I think this is a guy, if everything works out, will be a top pairing defenseman. That's a fan favorite, that throws around the body, pisses off the other team, and just makes you love to have him on your team. This is the type of player you want to have on your team and you do not want to face against the other teams. So let's jump into it. Carter Yakemchuk, big guy, right-handed defenseman, 6'3", 194 pounds, and the right-handed defenseman last year played in 66 games. Hold on to your horses. Take a seat if you can. Maybe grab your popcorn as well while you take a seat. But get comfortable and make sure you sit down because I don't want you to pass out when you hear these stats. These are stats for a defenseman, not a forward. My goodness, in 66 games last year, Carter Yakemchuk with Calgary of the WHL compiled a flashy 30 goals. 10, 20, 30. 30 goals as a defenseman. That was just 2 behind Zane Perrick, who is considered one of the best offensive defensemen we've seen in a draft in recent memory. So that's some pretty good company to be part of, by the way. 30 goals and 41 assists for 71 total points in 66 games played. You just saw some highlights. Let's keep the highlight reel going, baby. My goodness, Carter Yakemchuk is literally a walk-in highlight reel. This guy is so flashy, soft hands, good skating, elite offensive ability. He's got a boom from the point, a great shot, and most importantly, the physical tools that he brings to the game as well as a defender makes him such a well-rounded player. Of course, there's room to grow, but my goodness, he has the tools to be a hell of a top defenseman on the top pairing, next to a Jake Sanderson maybe, on the right side. Once again, this fills such an important positional need for the Ottawa Senators. If you look at the prospect pool, there's really no one on the right side in Ottawa, in Belleville, or throughout the organization. Carter Yakemchuk automatically becomes one of the best prospects we have and easily one of the best for the right side as well. So just for that alone, on top of the intangibles and the attributes and the skill that he brings, Carter Yakemchuk just fills that need in an elite way. And then on top of all that, once again, Carter Yakemchuk in general is just a solid player, regardless of positional need. You know, Carter Yakemchuk is a player that any team would love to have. And Yakemchuk, as I've already kind of alluded to, is an intriguing defenseman for a lot of reasons. And of course, his right-handedness just makes him even more valuable. Obviously, as you know, right-handed defenders are always coveted around the National Hockey League, which makes this guy, once again, even more valuable. This is, and I'm going to talk about this later on, he was one of the best right-handed defensemen in the draft, probably the second best in my opinion. So it's obviously a very good pick for the Ottawa Senators when you're drafting one of the best players at the position. Now, Yak himself, I'm going to nickname him Yak. I don't know exactly what his nickname is, but for now his nickname is Yak. I think that's only appropriate. I think it's a pretty sick last name. I think Yaki or whatever generic hockey name these players usually give these guys is a little too generic. We're going to go with Yak, but we'll see what the Sens go with later on. But Yak, or Yakemchuk, describes his game as, you know, he's a two-way defenseman who can produce offensively, play physically, and be a reliable defender. That's what he said to Jeff Merrick today at the draft with Sportsnet. So that's a really good reading, of course, of the type of player he is. Obviously, he's a guy that's very comfortable playing physically and offensively. And he says reliable. What that means to me is he knows he can play reliably defensively. Of course, it's his position. He has to play strong in that position. But he knows there's room for improvement. He knows he can produce. He knows he can play physically. He's reliable as a defender. He knows he can improve. And, you know, Steve Stais probably would agree with that. Here's what he said on the draft broadcast as well tonight. He said about Carter Yakemchuk, he's a 6'3" defenseman who not only brings offense, but has got some grit to his game as well. We still feel that there's a lot of rawness to him as well, so we feel that the potential is really, really high for Carter. He's a good character kid. Scout via Stephen Ellis's article in the Daily Faceoff also said about this kid, he's the last player I'd want to go one-on-one with. The scout said, he's menacing, he'll kill you at both ends, he's a guy every team wants, but nobody wants to play against. So I know I just threw a lot of quotes at you, but let me just break that down. Yakemchuk, he describes himself as a two-way guy. I think I'm maybe reading too deep into what he said, but based off of all the scouting reports and what Steve Stais said, clearly he can improve a little bit defensively, but he knows he's got that offensive ability and that physical ability. Stais sees the tools for the next great right-handed top-pairing defenseman for the Ottawa Senators. There is a lot of raw skill to this player as well. He's got a huge NHL-ready frame. He's got the size and weight as well, of course, on top of that frame. So, you know, he's got the build for it. He's got the offensive knack to be a solid NHL guy. But like any prospect, unless you're like the first overall pick, there's obviously going to be room for improvement. And of course, for Yakemchuk, as we're going to talk about soon, a lot of that has to be in his own zone, which is not exactly unique for an offensive-orientated defenseman being drafted. A lot of the offensive-orientated defensemen, like Zane Parekh, for example, have defensive issues. If you're an elite defenseman, that is going to be a star in the league who has all the intangibles in the world to be a very good player. The defense is just going to round into form as you continue to develop. So I'm not worried about his defensive game whatsoever. Frankly, it's not even that weak. It's just if I had to pick the weak point of Yakemchuk's game, it's his defense compared to his offense, no doubt. But once again, he's still strong in both ends for sure. Because remember, his physicality makes him a unicorn. It makes him a very unique player for this draft and allows him to be effective at times. Obviously, in the offensive zone, he can shield the puck. Thwart defenders off of him and really have good puck control. But of course in his own zone as well, around the net, along the boards, in the corners, he's going to kill you. He's going to kill you. And we're going to talk about that right now because sometimes he does a little bit too much killing. Because if you look at his penalty kill minutes from last year to this year, the jump is absolutely mind-blowing. Because this guy is a pest. My goodness, this guy is a pest. It's unbelievable. In 2022, 2023, he had 31 penalty minutes. Who cares? 31, whatever. This year, like I said already a few minutes ago, if you're not sitting down, make sure you're sitting down by now. 120 penalty minutes this past year. Woo! That is crazy. Look, playing with flair is great. It's good. It's fantastic. Frankly, you don't have enough of it in the National Hockey League from your blue line. And Ottawa desperately needs it from their blue line. But you're definitely going to want him to curtail that back and cut it back, some of those penalties as he progresses over these next few years. No doubt about it. I mean, once again, he's got a flair, which is going to translate, I think, beautifully to the National Hockey League game. You can't teach that. It just comes naturally. And I love that. I love hearing that kind of thing. He's a dog. He fought 5 times last year, by the way. He can throw them down, that's for sure. And Ottawa desperately needs that. Once again, this is a unicorn player where he's physical, he has offensive abilities, and, he can just beat the hell out of you. So he really is an interesting defenseman. And once again, he's the prototypical defenseman that us here in Ottawa have been looking for years in the back end for the Sens. So in that regard, this is great. But obviously, as he matures and develops, you're going to want him to get a little more mature in his game for sure. Now, as I already kind of mentioned, he's very strong along the boards and is very effective at boxing out opponents near the net as well. So Zach Hyman, my buddy, my friend, do not get comfortable out front of the net when you're playing against Carter Yakemchuk. He'll push you rather quickly. He'll box you out very quickly. He's very strong. And once again, as I already said, has the National Hockey League size right now already to be able to jump into the National Hockey League game. He can potentially even step into the National Hockey League as soon as next year. I doubt that happens, though. He will definitely take at least another year or two to develop, and I wouldn't rush him. I mean, once again, this is a player that Steve Staios said himself has raw abilities. They clearly don't see him as a guy that likely will be stepping into Ottawa's top 6 next year. This is a guy that will take a year or two to develop, but once he's fully developed, rounds his entire game into form, watch out. This easily can be, as I said in my draft preview about a week ago, can be a steal for any team taking him. And Ottawa took him, and he's going to be a steal potentially for sure. He has all the tools. He's got all the ingredients to be a steal for the Sens. And once again, you could be disappointed about the pick, but you shouldn't be. You really shouldn't be. Firstly, we should have learned our lesson after the Tkachuk draft. All right? You should have learned your lesson by now, okay? Let's just see what happens. That's 1. 2, Yakemchuk is not a brutal pick. This is a pick that was easily supposed to be within the top 15 and one of the deepest defenseman drafts of all time. Of all time in modern history, and at least for expectations. So Yakemchuk is a guy that was on the quote-unquote lower end compared to the Zibuims and the Perricks and the Dickinsons and whatever, but he was still in that conversation. He was on the draft boards, according to Stephen Ellis, of a couple teams within the top 5. So this is a guy that is not coming out of the blue. This is a guy that's earned his pick, and this is a guy that if you're not thrilled with the pick, I think he's going to surprise you. And if you are thrilled with the pick, I think he's going to reward you for feeling that way tonight. He was easily a top 3 right-handed defenseman in this draft as well. And once again, I can't say this enough. In any other draft, he is top 10. And the fact that he was easily a top 15 pick in this draft, as I've already mentioned, a very deep one on the blue line, says it all. That says it all to me. Now, as I already mentioned, as you already saw as well in that highlight reel earlier in this video, he's got some soft hands. That's like a warm knife cutting through butter. He can cut through defensemen like that. It's so sick. He looks like a forward, but he's a defenseman, and he's a big one at that. He's so soft with the puck. And once again, I'm not comparing him to a Silyev, but one of the big reasons I loved Silyev is because he was a huge defender who can move the puck well, and Yakemchuk is similar in that regard because, like Silyev, he also brings that physicality to the game as well. And that's where I was a little concerned about Zane Perrick, for example, where he has all the offensive abilities in the world, but he's a bit undersized. He has some defensive concerns. Yakemchuk has some defensive concerns as well. He's not undersized whatsoever. He has the NHL frame, he has the right side shot that we're looking for, and he has similar offensive abilities. This is a pick that can really turn out to be a steal in my opinion, because once again, there's so much subjectivity around the defenseman in this draft. He easily could be one of the best, if not the best, out of the group. It really just depends on how that skating progresses. Once again, he's a fine skater, as you saw. He's a smooth skater, but of course, like always, there's always room for improvement. And when you're struggling a bit defensively, and his defensive issues, once again, really come from, his defensive IQ issues. And, of course, that comes with, as an offensive guy, you want to jump into the play and everything. But that mixed in, of course, with some edge work issues. He's a fine skater. He can, of course, improve in that. And it by no means, hurts his style of play or hurts his draft stock. but he's just a fine skater. He's not known for it. So he could definitely improve on the skating. And I think if he improves on the skating, that defensive game as well is going to improve tenfold. Once again, half of the defensive issues that defenders have when they go to the National Hockey League or get to that next level is keeping up in terms of their skating with the guys they're going against. So I think Yakemchuk has the physical tools to keep up. I think he has the offensive abilities to keep up. I think he has the defensive abilities to keep up a bit. Of course, you want him to thrive, though. So I think a little bit more development for sure, a little bit more improvement on the skating. And this is a guy, as I already said, who might be looked back as a guy that was taken, probably more appropriately than people are saying as of right now. Now, as I already mentioned at the beginning of this video, very strong shot is what Yakemchuk has. Very strong shot. And by the way, since the start of the 21st century, only one 18-year-old defenseman has scored 30 goals in a WHL season. And you're looking at him, Carter Yakemchuk. That's it. The only player in WHL history since the 21st century to score 30 goals as a defenseman. Kind of says it all. I don't know about you. This is a guy that's making history, and this is a guy that's putting up numbers similar to some of the best players, not defensemen, players in this year's draft. Now, in my opinion, to bring him to NHL comparable, I might get some heat for this. I see him like a Brent Burns type of player who's a physical puck mover, who plays like a madman out there and can back it up with offense, with physical domination, and of course, with effective two-way style of play. So, welcome to Ottawa, Carter Yakemchuk. I'm really fired up about this pick. I gotta be honest with you. At first, I'll be honest, I was a little surprised, not disappointed, just surprised that we passed up on some of the other guys. But, once again, you got to sit down and think about it for a few minutes. You take a look at the context. You take a look at the player himself and the tool set that this guy has and the raw tools especially that he has. And you really, really got to get excited because this is a guy for a really weak, prospect pool is going to really, really, really bring some good skill to that prospect pool. And hopefully within at least 2 years, I give him another year to develop. But maybe in 2 years, he can be in the National Hockey League full time. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I can't believe it. I think this is a pick that no one really expected, considering the players that were available. But once again, I think this is a pick that's going to work out very well for your Ottawa Senators. So let me know if you agree in the comment section down below. And once again, welcome to Ottawa, Carter Yakemchuk. Get ready for some beaver tails and some of the best shawarma you've ever had, my friend. Besides that, I'll see you probably tomorrow to recap the second round or second to 7 round of the National Hockey League draft and potentially some trades as well. So besides that, thank you all for watching. I'll see you all soon. Go Sens, go.